Hello, I'm Marigold Holmes, and this is my teacher ideology video. I believe that education should foster mutual understanding and appreciation for the uniqueness that is possessed by each individual. But how do you create such a learning environment? I believe in the power of 4 key pedagogical practices. They are inclusive classrooms, invitation to use linguistic resources, learning is reciprocal, and involvement of parents. Before I delve into the meaning of each of these, let me share a little about who I am. My mother is Japanese, and my father is an USer, or American, as we mistakenly call ourselves in this country. This makes me Amerasian, or half Japanese, as I was called growing up. From a very early age, I became a cultural border crosser, both literally because my father was in the U.S. Navy and his assignments took our family back and forth between the Pacific, and figuratively because I have been immersed and can freely move between Japanese and American cultures, as well as the many other cultures that were represented in my diverse and dynamic community. The military community, especially overseas, not only fosters interaction between Americans and the people of the host country, but also among the residents of the military base, which represent a broad spectrum of race, ethnicity, cultures, and beliefs. So, in addition to becoming bilingual and bicultural of my family heritage, I was able to experience communication in Tagalog, Korean, Pidgin, Creole, and all sorts of regional American colloquialisms, as well as gain cultural appreciation for all the different communities represented in our diverse military family. These experiences have made my life rich, and the reasons I firmly believe in the power of multilingual, multicultural, and global education. Now that you know why I feel so strongly about multilingual and multicultural education, let's return to the 4 key pedagogical concepts. The typical bilingual education model involves teachers that are able to speak the student's native language. However, Franquise and De La Luz Reyes points out that effective teaching of English as a subsequent language learners does not have to hinge on the teacher's ability to speak the student's native language. In other words, just because I do not speak Arabic does not mean that I will not be able to effectively interact and educate my students from the Gulf states. What is important is that I recognize each student's ability and desire to learn and find ways to incorporate ideas and concepts to which they can relate and create meaning. In the late 70s, when I was in elementary school, dominant or hidden curriculums were the norm. Educational policies stressed the importance of teaching content material in the context of a mythical model American created to maintain the dominance of Euro-American mainstream. Students were expected to conform to these model American ideals and to accept content in text as truth or normal. However, I was fortunate to enroll in schools that allowed teachers to create inclusive classrooms that empowered students to learn in their own cultural context. Under dominant curriculum policies, it was not unusual to learn about important holidays in the context of holidays celebrated by the Euro-American mainstream. Social studies textbooks illustrated scenes from Christmas, Easter, the 4th of July, and Thanksgiving, stating that these were the very important holidays. In 3rd grade, my teacher covered the unit on these important holidays by assigning us homework that entailed drawing a picture of a holiday that was important to our family. I immediately thought of New Year's, a holiday that is extremely important in Japan. I drew pictures of mochi, rice cakes, kites, and hagoita, a special paddle game that is played during New Year's. The next day, our teacher hung our drawings around the room. In addition to images of Christmas trees, Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, and turkeys, there were pictures representing the menorah, mochi, Hina dolls, and other objects I had never seen. The teacher asked each of us to explain our drawings, then explain why holidays are important. By allowing each student to share about a holiday important to them, she successfully taught us about the importance of holidays, and all students were able to understand why we celebrate certain days on our calendar. Inviting students to use their own linguistic resources is another important pedagogical practice utilized in bilingual education. Unfortunately, proponents of English-only policies criticize a student's use of his or her native language as linguistic interference that hinders a student's ability to acquire English language ability. However, the teachers at my school encourage students to use their native language as a resource for learning. For example, I still remember an incident in elementary school that illustrates a teacher's ability to invite students to use existing linguistic knowledge to learn English. That particular day, we were viewing slides about vegetables. With each scene, the students shouted out the names of the vegetables. Corn, tomato, carrot. When a green plump object appeared on the screen, a classmate shouted, "Piemon!" In the next moment, my other classmates began to laugh. However, the teacher quickly shushed everyone and praised my classmate for knowing the word in Japanese. She told us that piemon came from pimentão, the Portuguese word for green peppers. She went on to explain that green peppers were not native to Japan and that when Western traders brought these peppers into Japan, the Japanese people adopted their word for it. My teacher then invited all of us to shout out answers using the vegetable names we use at home. One student shouted green pepper. Another shouted bell pepper. My teacher explained that these were all correct answers. We learned that even in English, a vegetable may have several names. My teacher's praise of language knowledge and her invitation to use our own language created a supportive environment that allowed us to feel confident. We also became interested in the many words used to name vegetables. In this way, we were able to learn English and other languages. My teacher reinforced our linguistic identity rather than reprimanding us for a deficiency in English. She continued to invite us to use words and cultural context throughout the year as we learned new concepts and gained confidence in our ability to learn. Traditional curriculum mandate the teacher as the all-knowing authority of the classroom. However, creating inclusive classrooms means that the teacher must also be willing to learn from her students and integrate students' cultural and linguistic resources in the construction of reciprocal learning environments. The two stories I shared about my childhood provide examples of how my teachers were learners. In creating the inclusive classroom, one teacher learned about our cultural holidays while also imparting knowledge to us about American holidays. My other teacher learned names of vegetables in other languages while also helping us learn how to name the vegetables in English. Both teachers included mainstream and non-mainstream language and knowledge to help students develop literacy in our diverse world. Out of all four concepts, the involvement of parents is a concept about which I feel most passionate. Despite the inclusive environment of my primary education, English was most definitely the official language of instruction, and there were subtle undercurrents that pushed for English-only education. A concern of English-only education is that it often leads to native language loss. Luckily, my mother ensured that my brother and I did not lose our identity and language as a person with Japanese heritage. My mother wanted to ensure that her children never faced disadvantage or discrimination in the U.S., so she supported the use of English only in schools and at home. However, she also wanted to make sure that we took pride in our double identity as both American and Japanese. Therefore, she made sure we understood and embraced both American and Japanese culture and traditions. She did not simply leave it up to the schools to teach us about history, culture, ethics, and beliefs. She made sure that we learned about these topics in the home from the perspective of our family. As I mentioned previously, the educational climate of the 70s and 80s was one that advocated dominant curriculum. In such an era, the deficit views appeared to be the norm. Despite the diversity of my community, there were murmurs excusing poor performance by some of my friends because of their identity. Comments such as, "Well, it's not her fault, she's half Japanese," could be heard from time to time. I personally did not experience any overt discrimination in my youth. In fact, as a person whose appearance comes across as Caucasian, I have benefited from white privilege, especially as an expatriate living in Asia. I was always greeted with warm welcome and hospitality, perhaps because my appearance and actions conformed with many foreigners' expectations of Americans. Therefore, I am very conscious of the privileges that I bring into a space, especially as an educator striving to create learning spaces that are equitable to all students. And though I was enrolled very briefly in ESL, I was quickly placed into mainstream courses. And because I bought into the meritocratic ideology of our educational system, I worked hard to get good grades and was rewarded with membership into advanced courses and honor societies. I have also witnessed privilege from the other side. For example, as a non-Christian, I have often felt frustrated in classes such as history and literature that assume an understanding of and make frequent references to Christian concepts, a fundamental understanding that I do not possess nor to which I relate. These courses seem disconnected to my world and my reality. So there you have it, my teacher ideology. I believe that education should foster mutual understanding and appreciation of the uniqueness that is possessed by each individual. And to achieve this, I plan to incorporate pedagogical practices that celebrate diversity, create inclusive environments, and promote collaborative learning. I want to thank all my teachers who encouraged me to be the best person that I can be, and my parents who believed in me and instilled strong values and beliefs as a person who is double. I have been fortunate to have these people in my life, and like them, I want to support all the students with whom I will have the honor to engage. I have a dream, and that dream is to become an educator that inspires all students to achieve their goals, no matter how big or ambitious.